I'm Jim Collison. We're at the Heartland Developer Conference here in Omaha 2014. I'm with Anne Ruskamp, and we are talking this afternoon. Anne, thanks for coming on and being a part of what we're doing.
Absolutely.
We've been kind of billing these sessions as kind of bonus content, and so we're excited to hear. We heard there was a few technical problems in your session, and so if someone came to the session, this might be an opportunity, although you had to talk through the technical. And not give a demo. Maybe you can do the demo online, upload it, and we can make it a...
Hopefully at some other point
we'll get to that. Some other point. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, those kinds of things, just so we can get to know you a little bit.
So I'm a software engineer. I work at a local startup company in the Haymarket in Lincoln. I'm part of the Nebraska Global sort of family of companies down there.
Cool. Yeah.
I graduated from UNL as part of the Rake School, so lots of local ties. Kind of moved up here for school and never left, so just loved it.
And born and raised here in Nebraska as well?
No, I was born in Kansas, so moved north, but not too far.
Yeah. What brought you to the Rake School? How did that all come together for you?
So I ended up coming up to Nebraska for a tour when I was starting to look for colleges, and I went and met a professor that I knew who used to teach at K-State, so there's your Kansas connection.
Sure.
And he's like, hey, you should really go check out this well, at that time it was the J.D. Edwards School. It has since become the Rake School now, and checked it out, and it's a fabulous program. Highly recommend it to any high schoolers out there. And you just learn so much and get a lot of those integrated soft sorts of skills that are just invaluable. Yeah,
it's a school we really appreciate here at Gallup. Jody and I do some recruiting out there. And we actually started a high school internship program this last year at Gallup, and 2 of our students got the opportunity to be part of the Rake School.
Awesome.
Which is great. And so it's fun to kind of feed them instead of them feeding us. We became a feeder organization for them, which was kind of fun. I can't guarantee we'll get 2 students every year that make the Rake School, but certainly we've got a lot of respect for what they're doing at Rakes, and certainly they just give you guys a tremendous experience in what you're doing a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about your session. So just give me kind of a brief overview of what you wanted to cover, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so when I started with this company in Lincoln, I was new and green, and they're like, we really need someone to figure out builds. And at that point, it was very manual process, learned a lot, and then so we start getting our product out there, we start doing releases. It's a very manual process. Before you know it, we're still at the office and it's midnight, and we're releasing just those first few customers. And we do that time and time again, and it's just a very painful process. It seems like if you talk to anybody who's been in the industry for any amount of time, they have these epic stories of battles of getting the code out the door.
Yeah, it's huge, right?
Yeah. So after doing this for a really, really long time, we started saying, okay, enough is enough. We've started figuring things out. We've learned a lot of things. So through all this manual, we were retrospecting. We were, not just continuing to suffer, but trying to figure out, well, what could make this better. And at some point, we started taking off chunks, taking off those easy wins, and slowly building out an automated tool set to the point now where a release is really somebody clicks a button on Friday afternoon, we all leave the office and get an email on Saturday, and it's fantastic.
You're comfortable enough to just leave and let it run by itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want, you can obviously get online and get status updates, but we've really gotten to the point where now click it and forget it. It's fantastic.
That's good. It's good to hear. How long did that take from kind of the beginning of thinking about it till today?
So the builds, we really started thinking about those builds and all of those processes when I was first coming on about 3 years ago. I think we were saying that the actual code that we wrote to kind of do these steps, so we ended up writing a lot of internal tools because we have such a complex system. So the first code was written just over 2 years ago. We just had its birthday recently.
Was it? Did you guys come at it from, we're going to take the easiest stuff first, and give me an example, if you can give me an example of what?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. It's the easiest stuff first, but then also the highest impact things. So we took on a few things early on that were maybe not the absolute easiest things we could have done, but those were the highest impact. We have lots of, and at our company there's lots of emphasis on the data and the database. So improving the process around upgrading our databases in production and on QA was really probably our biggest pain point. So biting off that first just made a lot of sense.
Okay.
So in terms of that, we ended up writing our own scripts and creating a history or a backlog of all of the scripts that we've ever run, as opposed to doing a manual SQL compare of what's in production and what's on my machine.
Yeah. So for you guys, really, it was a script automation engine, so to speak, right? You were running these scripts for deployment all the time, pretty consistent. You can drop those in a loader and let them go, and they would do the same thing every time for you?
So that's a piece of it. So before we even had that, so way back, 3 years ago, someone, usually me, was given our production database, so where is it today, and was looking at my local dev database, and they said, all right, write the scripts, make it work. Using various tools that are out there, I was manually creating these scripts, and you can imagine it was very error prone. Lots of mistakes were made.
Very stressful, probably.
Very stressful. So then from there we kind of moved to this list of scripts, and so creating the backlog of that, got really good at that, and then we went to the next step of creating these tools that would automatically run for us. So that being one small piece of the entire automation system that we have today now.
And you wrote the software to run the scripts?
Yeah.
You did? Okay. And what's your back end? What's the database? What are you writing against?
So we're pretty much a .NET shop. So our database is SQL Server. Way back in the day, we were using the SQL Azure tools. We had to move away from that for various reasons.
Sure. Well, 3 years ago, Azure wasn't very good.
Yeah, Azure SQL at that time was not good at all. I've looked at the recent stuff. It's so much better. We were using the backpacks, and it takes 10 minutes to back something up. And
I know. It's pretty nice now. Yeah. I think if you haven't looked at Azure in a while, it's probably time to come back.
Yeah.
Take a peek.
Well, at this point, we have more requirements now that require local databases, and we're relying on some of the tools that are only available in SQL, full-blown SQL. So,
it's not all the way there yet.
Not there yet. So.
Well, and the cloud isn't for everything, right? I mean, they certainly Microsoft and Oracle and Google and Amazon want you to move. That's part of their business plan, right?
Yeah.
So, but the cloud is not for everybody, right?
Yeah. And we do tons in the cloud as it is today. So, small business, I kind of work on all sides. I do our server management as well, and so we have plenty of us stuff in the cloud. That's just one piece that's not there today.
Right. No, right on. It's always a hybrid. I think for most people, we're still hybrid.
Yeah.
What kind of lessons learned did you have in that first go around? What were some specific things you learned that somebody else could apply?
Yeah, I think so. That manual process at the very beginning was very, very painful. Don't get me wrong, but looking back now, 3 years later, maybe it's the hindsight is 20/20, or we're far enough now that it doesn't seem that bad. But we learned so much. I think it can't be overemphasized to really understand your problem, really understand your context. We had to go down the road of writing a lot of our own tools, but there's so many deployment tools out there today. There's so much more automation that's just ready out of the box that really makes sense for a lot of people. But if you don't understand your problem, if you don't understand the problems you're trying to solve, as software engineers, we sometimes want to, just jump in there and solve it and write the code and be done. But really, we had great leadership that was like, okay, let's slow down, let's think about this, let's, suffer the pain, let's get our process to the point where we can manually do this repetitively really, really well.
Yeah.
And it just made, then you really know what your quick wins are. You know what your highest value props are, and just can make better decisions from that.
Did you end up changing business processes at all once you started digging into some of these to sometimes the tail does wag the dog in that sense, and you're like, this doesn't make sense, and then you find bad business processes. Anything like that you found in there?
So we've tweaked a lot of things, but there was nothing that was just wholesale thrown out the window. We're a mostly agile shop. We're not, religious that we follow everything to the book, but we do a lot of those things. Our iterations got shorter. We do more frequent releases now. Now we really strive to release every single week unless there's a compelling reason to do otherwise.
Right.
Whereas initially when you're doing manual SQL compares, that's like once every couple months if you're lucky.
Right. Yeah, well, you spend so much time getting ready for it.
Absolutely.
And then, finally the day comes and it's bug prone, and until you get that process down. And going weekly, you just don't have as many changes. You don't have as many physical changes, right? And so little tiny increments as opposed to one big gigantic release. Then you're fighting fires for the next couple weeks.
Yeah, your risk is absolutely reduced, and we've found that we've ended up with better product. We've had so much fewer cases where software gets out the door and it's crashed, like the application is crashing now or something like that. When you're making those more iterative, those smaller changes, it just, it was hard to get into that rhythm, and very much so. It's very easy to be sitting there and like, oh, we'll just do it next week.
Yeah.
No problem. We'll just, 1 week doesn't matter, but then 1 week becomes 2 weeks, becomes 3 weeks. So, that's probably another of your lessons learned, to not just be doing those things in name. We can say we're doing it iteratively and releasing frequently, but if we're not holding ourselves to that standard, then you're really not getting the benefits of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Anything that you wrote back in the day that, and a buddy of mine says that, and he always says it in an old man voice, back in the day, that you'd replace now, or that you're looking to replace now because maybe the market's matured and that product will now do what you want it to?
Not really at this point. There's a lot of tools out there that I was looking at, and they can do most of what we need, but where we're really having high volatility in our database changes, we keep multiple versions of all of our services on our server at the same time. We have, I think I was counting, we have 6 or 7 unique clients that we are hosting, one WPF app, and then multiple different websites that are hosted on different servers.
Sure.
So there's just that level of complexity out there that, if we just had websites, or our clients didn't need to be able to be on different versions, just those few things that, so at this point, we're really kind of where we need to be.
Well, it's customized though, right? I mean, it's a lot of your own customizations, but they work for you. Right?
Absolutely.
And there's always that, and as an engineer, you'll see there's always that decision buy versus build.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot, right? I mean, it sounds like in a lot of cases you guys have decided to build, but it's what's worked right for you. When you did your session, what kind of questions did you get? What were they asking you?
Yeah,
about the
so
process?
One part of our process that is probably fairly unique is we have this thing called database checks. And so I got several questions about that, probably because it's a very unique thing. People haven't heard about it before. They're like, what is this? So for us, our database checks are essentially unit tests for our database. In our industry, we take on a lot of quote-unquote bad or customer data that's not quite how we would like it, which means that we can't constrain our database how we would really like to really make sure that we have everything connected up how it should be. And because of that, we've written these, along with some other reasons, we've written these database checks that allow us to essentially unit test our database. Is the data good enough? Are the configurations that we're making not going to break something else that we were doing? And it kind of becomes this gate or this regression that going out the door is just that extra check of is this really, really going to work? So, going back to that manual process, one of the things we ended up finding out was that more often than not, when we were having problems with a release after it got out the door, it was because of a database problem. It was because of a configuration problem. It was because we had shoved in client data and it wasn't quite what we expected.
Sure.
And so then it gets out in the wild and it's not behaving quite how we want it to. So by creating these unit tests of our database, we have just that extra level of confidence.
Yeah.
And we can kind of set different severities on that of oh, whoa, you shouldn't let this go out the door, or maybe you should go look at this and tweak it a little bit before our next release.
Would you call that a data quality component then? I mean, are you checking the data for quality as far as like is it conforming to the standards that field's expecting and those kinds of pieces? Is that what you mean when you
Yeah,
integrity?
There are definitely ones that do that. There's other ones that our system is very, very configurable, and so sometimes, if you configure A, then we expect that B and C and D are configured as well.
Okay.
But in our default settings, B, C, and D aren't configured. So we have checks that say, well, did A get turned on? Oh, well, go make sure that B, C, and D are there as well.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
it kind of provides extra confidence there. I mean, there's the argument that we should probably be better about our configuration, and that's something we continue to get better at. But I don't really imagine us ever getting rid of the database checks because it really is that final regression, that final check, that final confidence that that a lot of people, ourselves included, get from unit tests about our code. But because we can't keep our database constrained like I would probably expect and hope that most people are doing with theirs, we've kind of found this creative option B that really works for us. So I probably wouldn't recommend that people, instead of keeping your data clean, just unit test your data.
Right.
But I think the lesson learned there really is that, well, if you can't go with your game A, then maybe there's a B option out there if you're a little bit creative that really works well.
Sure. Okay. Without digging into it, you spent some time going through a demo and or trying to go through the demo in your session. If there was someone who came to your session and it's a short 45 minutes here. Right. It's very, very short. And there was like at the end you're like, oh, I wish I had said this in my session. Anything like that you got to the end and went, I wish I would have covered that besides the demo part?
Yeah, I really would have loved to have some of those diagrams to help explain things. I really think that
that's okay. Yeah, no.
It really comes down to a lot of those same sorts of things in terms of are you doing what makes sense in your context, and are you really looking at the problem that you really have there, which is, you can't say enough, probably.
Yeah, okay. Good enough. Let me ask you this. Certainly, I'm going to do a big shift gears in the sense that we're very sensitive to women in IT. And obviously you went through the rake school. Probably one or two of, I don't know, how many ladies were in your class?
I think there was 5 or 6 of us that graduated.
Okay, so that's a pretty good number.
Yeah, we had a great number.
Yeah, and are you getting opportunities at all? Of course, I work with a bunch of STEM organizations, both in Omaha and the state of Nebraska, and our whole goal is to get gals more excited about, having tech as their career. What did it for you? What typically we lose the gals in junior high.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. What kept you on track that ended you up at the rake school and ended you up in a technology company?
Yeah, I mean, probably the easy default answer is my dad's a computer science professor. But I mean, looking back, I didn't program until I got to college. I always kind of knew I wanted to be in the math and sciences. It was, always growing up on the kind of the farm and those problem-solving sorts of things. I always kind of knew that there's lots of interesting problems to solve out there, and so and just getting opportunities to do that.
Yeah. But you're a little bit of an anomaly. Right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a total anomaly.
Yeah. Kansas, farm girl, science and technology that typically doesn't. And we're trying to figure out why. It should, and it could. It did for you.
Yeah.
Right? And we're continuing to try and figure out what can we do to encourage, because we're missing a bunch of gals who should be doing what you're doing. Do you find in the 3 years since you've been out of school, is it different being a woman working in an area that's a lot of tech guys, right?
I mean, absolutely. You go to the office and there's just, a different feel, vibe to it than if you walked into an office full of ladies.
Right.
But I've really appreciated the culture at the company I work at. The guys there have been more than supportive.
Great.
You know, there's always this kind of tendency that, oh, the minority, we're gonna either, you know, don't want to offend them, you can't do any of these sorts of things, but, you know, have really just embraced that, and I absolutely loved it there.
Good. Well, let me encourage you. We need, as a state, as a nation, we need gals like you to go out and mentor, and, you know, if anybody's listening to this and you're in that position, mentor and guide and lead, because we've got very smart gals who are not making their way into some very smart technical fields. Like you have.
One of the cool things that we've been doing at Nebraska Global is partnering with the local schools and their after-school program, and going there and working with kids grade 3 through 5. Last year we primarily worked with Scratch and just teaching them that, and we also got some Finch robots too, which was a really cool couple of weeks that we got to play around with those. And I think those opportunities, just exposure, we definitely targeted schools there that had kids that probably wouldn't get exposure there otherwise. So there's the minority of women, but the fact of the matter is that software development as a whole just has a huge gap in terms of lack of talent, like women, minorities, otherwise. We just need those kinds of people. And there's lots of people that have the talent, have the intelligence there. So exposure at a young age, continued encouragement and opportunities through middle school and high school, and then really continuing to follow up and have those communities from then on. Have been
That's good. I might cut that out and make that a public service.
Oh goodness.
announcement. No, it's a good call to action. We're all responsible for that, and so you know, you're right in every sense of the way and every sense of the term. Last question: are you a girl geek? Do you geek out on devices and gadgets, and do you live technology outside of work? Do you kind of live technology?
No, I don't. I love my gadgets. I love the ones that I have, but you know, this is probably another one of those anomalies. When I go from work, I kind of like to disconnect and have that time, read my books, and sit on the porch and have a cup of coffee.
Oh, that's
those
great.
Sorts of things.
It's a good thing
really
to do.
Love the neighborhood.
The other day I realized, I was like, I wonder when the last time I read a whole book. You know, we consume so much thing, either podcasts or short video snippets on Facebook, or we read these little tiny things, and I could not remember the last time I had plowed all the way through a book. And so I went and bought a book. Like, I'm going to get through this thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm doing that now. So it's all that stuff is good. Although I do like my gadgets. So
absolutely.
As you can see here, I like what we do, and it works for everybody. Anne, thanks for taking a few minutes.
Oh, thanks
to be with
for
us
having
today.
me.
No, great, and wish you the best of luck, and maybe you'll get to speak on this again or something similar.
Hopefully.
Is this the first time you've done a conference, or have you spoke at conferences before?
I spoke at the Lincoln conference.
The Code Camp?
Yes, I've spoken at Code Camp before. So
Good. Well, stay involved in those things.
Absolutely.
Speak as often as you can. Find out ways to be an influence to young gals that, in that junior high age. The elementary schools are covered really well. There's a lot of STEM programs that are covered in elementary school. That junior high range is where we're missing them, so we'll focus on that as well. Big passion for me. I just want to see that change in the state of Nebraska and across the United States, and so we'll continue to. One of the reasons we started a high school internship program at Gallup was to be able to start. The high schools are not getting covered very well either.
Yeah.
And so I've really felt like that's a business. The corporate America should pony up and help cover the high school program.
Well, it's only going to benefit them in the long run.
Right on. And I know I'm training people who will probably work for you someday, but we're okay. That's good. Some of them work for us, and that's going to be just fine. So, Anne, thanks again. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hang tight for 1 sec.